Well, this is my third Waterfowl Summit, and I think this is the first I've presented, so thank you very much for the opportunity to come speak to you today about the Upper Basin Project. My colleague Maurice, you heard him just a little while ago. He was very much involved with the beginning of the project, in its inception and its planning. He talked a lot about the project and everything that he did and how important he is and blah, blah, blah. But it's my project now, baby. Well, for those who might not be familiar of where we're talking about, the Upper St. Johns River Basin lies mostly in Brevard County and a bit of it in Indian River County. As Maurice did mention before, it is considered a semi-structural approach to flood control. And what that means is that we are taking advantage of the natural function of the marsh to store and treat stormwater, as opposed to the old way of thinking of ditching and draining and shunting excess stormwater out to tide. That was good 30 years ago, and that's the way it was done. But this project is the first of its kind. It was the largest. Now it is second to the Everglades project in South Florida. The project does consist of about 150,000 acres, very large project, 150 miles of flood protection levee, several major flood control structures, and dozens of smaller culverted structures. Let me add too that this project is a cooperation with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What we hope to achieve with the Upper Basin Project is, of course, first and foremost, flood control. That is the primary objective of this project. It is what Congress authorized this project for in 1954. However, with the design of the semi-structural approach and using the marshes for their intended purposes, we also can expect to improve water quality instead of just throwing that water out to tide, improve the hydrology of the marsh, as now we're keeping more water on the marsh instead of draining it. And along with that, we get enhanced fish and wildlife. We're reducing the massive discharges of freshwater flows to the Indian River Lagoon. And all that comes together for increased recreational opportunities for the public. Well, why do we need the project to start with? I think this graphic demonstrates it very, very clearly. At the turn of the century, you can see that the St. Johns River Marsh looked very, very different from what it looks today. By 1972, a significant part of the marsh had been lost to agricultural development, residential, and other man-made impacts, to the point where there was hardly any marsh left. Now, through the efforts of the Upper Basin Project and the land acquisition that the St. Johns River Water Management District has done for that project, you can see that we've worked to reclaim a section of that marsh back into the river. That was the primary premise of this project, is to reclaim as much of that wetland and floodplain to restore that natural function as possible. Here it's highlighted, as you can see. Now, the project is made up of several different types of areas. Water management areas are the workhorse of the project, as they do most of the heavy lifting for water quality treatment. All the areas in this project provide stormwater storage, but the water management areas do the bulk of the job of cleaning that water up before it gets discharged to the main stem of the river and flows 310 miles downstream to Jacksonville. The water management areas are shown here in the pink areas. And those are areas that were formerly agricultural land that were acquired, were improved, and by improved I mean the improvements that were on it were taken out, levees, culverts removed, and that area allowed to rehydrate, where agriculture used to pump from these areas into the main part of the river. Now the agricultural areas pump into the water management areas, and the water is held there for water quality improvement. And when the agricultural needs that water back for irrigation, they take it back through gravity, isolating their discharges from the main stem of the St. Johns River. The next predominant area is marsh conservation areas. These areas here are shown in green. They generally follow the main stem of the river, and for the most part, although this doesn't hold 100% true, those were areas that weren't heavily altered by agricultural activities, which is not to say that they weren't impacted by agricultural activity, they just weren't actively farmed. Those are the areas that we're trying to keep this agricultural discharges from the east away from and preserve those areas. Now we also have retention-detention areas. These areas are by and large fixtures of the old Upper Basin project. And I say old because in 1954, when this project was originally authorized, the Corps had come in and designed a project that would include several upland reservoirs up here on the west side of the ridge that would stop the water before it got to the river, store it, and then discharge it through a series of canals to the Indian River Lagoon. Those of you that have heard of the C-54 canal, that is a feature of the old Upper St. Johns River Basin project, which then was called the Central Southern Florida Flood Control Project. So the detention areas are features of those old projects which were constructed before the project was stopped and are still functional parts of the project. And then we have marsh restoration areas. These areas are shown here in the tan type areas, and those are areas where the district has had opportunity purchases to acquire additional floodplain lands and incorporate those into the project, but yet do not serve a specific flood control function and are not within the footprint of the federal flood control project. So that's pretty much the makeup of our project and how those areas work. You can see here, these two are two of the 3 or 4 reservoirs that were constructed as part of the original project. That's the Jane Green detention area, and that's the Taylor Creek Reservoir up by Lake Poinsett. That's State Road 520 right up there. Going over again, that we have several water management areas. We have the Blue Cypress. Well, we have stick marsh. Let me back up one. We have the Stick Marsh, St. John's water management area. These are the 2 Blue Cypress water management areas. And then we also have Fellsmere water management area, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Sawgrass Lake water management area is another area that's at the north end, and that's, even though it's included in this project, I think my colleague Bill Tredick, who's supposed to speak next, will talk to you more about Sawgrass Lake water management area. And as I said earlier, they are the workhorses for improving water quality of the agricultural discharges that they receive. Marsh conservation areas, Blue Cypress, Three Forks, Fort Drum, and St. John's. St. John's is in Brevard County, just north of the Indian River County line. Three Forks is a new marsh conservation area that will be coming online hopefully either by the end of this calendar year or early next year as the Corps finishes that work. Once that work is done, the Upper Basin project will officially be complete. All construction will be done on that project. Not a day too soon. It's only taken them 30 years. So as we, I love my Corps friends. I do. But as we like to say around the district, the Corps may be slow, but they are expensive. And my friends would agree with that too. So, all right, these are the functions of the marsh conservation areas. Yeah, they improve much of the river's hydrology downstream, provide a lot of the stormwater storage, store the peak discharges so that we can then slowly release that water through its natural course downriver. The retention areas, as I mentioned before, serve a similar function in that they're just there for short-term storage. Don't really use the water doesn't sit in those long enough to really get a big benefit of water quality, but then they're draining water from the uplands, not direct agricultural discharge, so their function is pretty much just to slow the water down and keep it there, and they are still functional parts of the project. Those marsh restoration areas, 6 Mile Creek and Broadmoor, again, former ag lands that we were able to purchase. Not really part of the federal flood control project, but directly contiguous to and work synergistically with the project to enhance the function of the river. Things that we do within those marsh conservation areas, I mentioned before, include when we get those, we take down any berms that might have been there. We remove culverts. Sometimes a lot of vegetation removal. If there was former citrus trees, citrus groves, we remove the citrus groves. A lot of the infrastructure that goes along with citrus, irrigation, subterraneous irrigation. There's quite a bit of work that's involved in taking one of these agricultural properties and putting it back as best we can. We've also done some planting where possible and then rehydrating it. Well, how well has this project been working? Most of the improvements for the Upper Basin project south of the Indian River County line were completed by 1996. And that's shown right here on this arrow. So this graph shows how many times we've had to discharge to the C-54 from the Upper Basin project. As you can see, prior to 1996, before the features of the Upper Basin project in Indian River County were completed, there were quite a few instances of discharge to the lagoon. Once those projects were completed, you can see there's only been 3 instances of discharge to the lagoon since 1996, and we have not had a discharge to the Indian River Lagoon since 2008 with Tropical Storm Faye. So I'd say that's a pretty good metric on how we're doing. Here's Three Forks Marsh Conservation Area. This is, once again, the last part of the project before we can claim victory that this project is now complete. Construction on that started in 2008, supposed to be done in 2009, but there were some issues came up with some cultural resources within the project that halted the project. It took quite a bit of time to iron those issues out with the tribes, but the Corps has been successful, and they are re-engaged now to begin construction again to finish that project. They anticipated finishing that later this year. The project now will take water from the south, from the stick marsh here. It'll bring water in. There will be a lake at the north end here to the tune of about maybe 5,000 to 6,000 acres of a lake that will be about maybe 2 to 3 feet deep most of the time, and the outlet will be up here to where you see this stem of the river come in. There's an outlet structure right there. For those that have been out there for years, there's a public boat ramp right here at the north end that we've referred to for quite some time as the boat ramp to nowhere, essentially, but soon enough there'll be quite a bit of activity there. We've had quite a bit of rainfall lately, and that area now is pretty well flooded, although once the project is done, there'll be a really nice sized lake out there. I get calls all the time, well, how long is it going to take to fill? My answer is, well, it depends on how much it rains. If this year is an indication of what our typical years are going to be from now on, it'll fill up pretty quick. We've had quite a bit of rain this year. Here's our latest project, Fellsmere Water Management Area. It's a very ambitious project. It's in excess of 10,000 acres, and it is immediately adjacent to the St. John's Water Management Area in Indian River County. It is not part of the federal flood control project. However, it'll add approximately 30,000 acre feet of storage to the project, which will virtually eliminate any need to discharge water to the Indian River Lagoon once the project is done. We started this project in 2008 with the acquisition, well, we acquired 4,000 acres and started construction on that 4,000 acres. During that period, we acquired another 6,000 acres for a total of 10,000 acres. Of course, in 2008, we finished the 4,000 acres just in time for Tropical Storm Faye to come and reflood that project for us. Thank you, Faye. And we're working very diligently on this project. Right now, the total cost in this project is projected to be in excess of $55 million, and that does not include land acquisition. And we hope to be done with this project by the end of 2015. Here's what we're looking to accomplish once we're done. Now, this was all former ag land, crop, citrus, sod, pasture. We'll have quite a large impoundment here, and then as you go up the hill, you can see the change in vegetation from emergent marsh to slough and a bit of upland up at the very, very top. Major part of this project is constructing the eastern levee, which will separate the Fellsmere Water Management Area from the adjacent agricultural land. A lot of those pastures in citrus have been transformed. We've been partnering with the Game Commission to do a lot of sculpting in this area. I'll show you some pictures of that, to try to enhance the bottom of this area so that when it is flooded, it'll be prime habitat for fisheries. And there you have somebody in a backhoe working on doing just that. This was an excellent partnership with the Fish and Game, I have to say. We worked very well together on this and other projects, and I hope that we can, in the future, continue our partnership. This is one of the fish management areas after it's been done and partially reflooded. As you can see, the guy in that track hoe had a really, really good time going out there and playing in the dirt. All those areas will provide a refugia for fish, and as the water goes down, the fish will have someplace to go. There's also planned through there navigation channels for boats to get all throughout the 10,000 acres to be able to access these areas. Here's how this project used to work. Before we acquired the project, all this area here that was citrus would pump their water out into St. John's St. John's Water Management Area and into a canal here that goes into the St. John's Water Management Area. This is the primary treatment reservoir. Once they needed water, once they got rid of enough water, and when they needed irrigation water back, they'd open a series of culverts through this levee and take water back in. What the Fellsmere Water Management Area done is now we intercept this water so that instead of pumping it out into here, now their primary source of water treatment is going to be this 10,000 acres. They're going to replace their pumps and pump into the Fellsmere Water Management Area. The water will then be stored there, cleaned up, and along with rainwater and other inputs from the south through the project is what's going to fill up that area. Now, I did say previously that with this 10,000 acres that we will virtually eliminate any discharge to the Indian River Lagoon. And I picked that word very carefully because at the very north end, we do have an emergency spillway which will discharge to the C-54, which eventually goes out to the Indian River Lagoon. However, the design storm that is designed to is actually a theoretical storm that we will most likely never see. So I just wanted to, but because of regulations and the way the climate that we're in right now, particularly in the post-Katrina environment that we live in, those kind of design features have to be included in large reservoirs of this type. So that's the Fellsmere Water Management Area. So wrapping it up, the Upper Basin Project, as Maurice did say, it is a model of what we can do in a natural freshwater system. It is the first project of its kind. The final components of this project hopefully will be done by 2015, and then we're going to claim victory and move on. Primary objectives of the project, once again, flood control, along with improved water quality, water supply downstream, so we can augment base flows down the river. By keeping that water in the headwaters of the state, we can release it more slowly downstream for potential water supply downstream, and then habitat restoration and enhancement. And of course, with the additional freshwater, with the additional storage of the project, eliminating discharges to the Indian River Lagoon. Now, the project does have, I mentioned that before also, that we do have recreational components of this project. The federal government partnered with us at a 50-50 cost share to construct, I believe it was 4 recreational access points in the project. So I really have to give kudos to the government on this one, and the partnership that we've enjoyed with the Army Corps of Engineers in building this project. And with that, I'll entertain any questions. Yes, sir.
Off of the Malabar Road, that boat ramp to nowhere you were talking about?
Yes.
On the south end of that, are they gonna cut a hole through there so that'll, how are they gonna bring the water on across? Because now there's dikes over there.
Yes, the Three Forks Marsh Conservation Area is actually made up of 3 individual parcels. There's the parcel at the south that kind of looks like Nevada, and then there's the middle parcel, and then there's the north parcel, which has access to the boat ramp. The remaining construction features are require or entail connecting that third piece and that second piece, blocking off that flowway, so that now we're going to have that entire contiguous 13,000 acres.
So what you're saying is where the willow shelter is now?
That is correct. Where that?
Right. Are they gonna cut through, right on through to what we call Centauri's?
Yes. Yeah, those 2 levees on either side of that flowway where that shelter is, those levees will be gone, and that's all going to be one open.
So it can be accessed from Malabar Road?
You can access that from Malabar.
Over the airboat jumps over in
A couple of airboat jumps from the C40 canal.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that gonna be done by when?
2015, end of 2015.
This is 14 now, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I can only report what I'm told.
Yeah, I know.
Don't shoot the messenger.
To the north, from 192, well, back a little bit from 192, there's an area in there. There's no access to that unless you want to ride a bicycle to it. You know what I'm talking about?
Is that the Sawgrass Lake Water Management Area?
I guess you could call
It's south of 192.
Yep, that's right. Sweetwater.
Yes, that is Sawgrass Lake Water Management Area. I believe there's access. There's walk-in access in that one.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Let me talk a little bit about access to some of these properties. The district's policy. I'm sorry. I don't know if you're hearing the question, but the gentleman is asking about the Sawgrass Lake Water Management Area. What kind of access will there be for that area as far as recreational access? That area, it's about 3.5 square miles, is designed to be a treatment wetland. So although the district's policy is to open as much of our land to public enjoyment as we can, we do have to have certain restrictions on certain lands. This is one of those. Since it's a wetland, we had to restrict any kind of motorized access through there because the airboats and the like cut trails through the vegetation, creating shortcuts. So there is walk-in access. We did make access on the west side available by airboat to jump the levee, and then you can park your airboat and either canoe in or walk in.
All right. Getting back to the Malabar entrance there, there's an airboat trail now that scoots across to go to the C54 canal.
Mm-hmm.
Is that whole area going to be open?
That
Just that, right now, the canal, you have to stay on that airboat trail, or otherwise you, with a motorized boat is what I'm asking for, other than that trail.
Okay. Is the trail going to be the only access in the northern part of Three Forks marsh conservation area from the boat ramp at the end of Malabar Road. And the answer is that trail was cut to thin out the vegetation, but that area is going to be the deepest area of the impoundment. So over time, that's going to be the deepest part of the lake. So particularly in an airboat, you'll have plenty of water to go around.
So like a go-down, I will be able to go off of that airboat trail with it? And
I'm not the,
Happy to be with them afterward to answer the question.
all right.
okay. Yeah,
Can you,
yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
can you quantify the nutrient reductions you're seeing? What kind of quality of water are you getting on your outfalls?
I can tell you we've had mixed bag on that. Getting back to the Sawgrass Lake Water Management Area, that's a very new wetland. It's only been in operation for about 3 years or so. We are seeing, as measured from the inflow to the outflow, a greater than 90% reduction in nutrients from inflow to outflow. Outstanding performance of that wetland. Throughout other parts of the basin, though, because they've been degraded for decades by agricultural discharge, there is a lot of nutrients laden in the soils in those areas. And what we're finding is that as those muck soils dry out, they oxidize. And then when they rehydrate, we get a pulse of nutrients downstream. So to answer your question, has the project improved water quality? I'd have to say yes, because we've isolated the primary source of inflow, which was agricultural discharge directly to the river. We still have some challenges in the river, and getting the hydrology right, particularly in the marsh area, so that those soils don't dry out and don't oxidize, is really our focus now in the river. Yes, sir.
That was pretty much my question.
Wow.
I'll break it down to more specific. How is the Lake Apopka area doing for their natural filtration?
I don't have any numbers on Lake Apopka. I don't work in that area. I apologize. I can't answer that.
They pretty much use a natural filtration for this.
We're doing this. I do know that the Secchi depth, for example, in Lake Apopka, before we built the March Flowway and did the North Shore, the North Shore improvements, we had Secchi depths in the range of just a few inches. And now I think you can put a Secchi depth down to about 1.5 feet to 2 feet down on Lake Apopka. So at least the clarity is much better in Lake Apopka. There's a question over here. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering what the impact of these management areas is on groundwater in terms of the groundwater levels, recharge, and also groundwater quality.
Well, I can't speak directly to that. I can only imagine, though, that by impounding those areas that were previously drained and keeping water on that we're helping to improve groundwater levels, particularly the surficial groundwater. One of the main focuses of the project is to encourage the agricultural areas to choose surface water as a primary source of irrigation, and then groundwater as a secondary source of irrigation. And the shift of the project has accomplished that, which also helps preserve groundwater levels. Back there. Is that Jeff Murray?
Don't know.
In the vegetation map you showed earlier, it was kind of the flood control component. As everything's kind of clearing out on the open water in the vegetation map, if cattails persist out there, how does that impact the hydrology of the flood control? I mean, it gets massed up. What are the plans?
Well, as far as the hydrology of the project, we're talking two different types of hydrology. We're talking about the daily management of the project as the water levels go up and down. We're also concerned with how the project will get rid of water under that very large event. Managing cattail is very difficult in Florida, particularly in areas that were historically agricultural. Cattails like high nutrient environment, and they thrive to the exclusion of just about every other species. What we're trying to do as far as moving water through the project is building channels in front of the outlet structures that are deep enough that cattails won't grow. And then we will selectively manage vegetation in those areas. As of right now, we do not have a system-wide or an area-wide plan to manage cattail throughout the entire project. It's going to be what it's going to be. Okay, I'm running one more question, ma'am.
Could you comment over the 30-year history of this project about the recreational opportunities for conservation-related type recreation, outdoor type recreation, the pros and the cons, the hurdles, the benefits, you know, just looking back and where you started and where you are now and
Well, that's a... Wow.
I think you need to come back next year.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. That'll be my talk next year. But I'll say this: we early on in the project, we envisioned a very strong recreational component with this project, and one of the goals that we had set is to have a contiguous nature trail from 192, the very north end of the project, all the way down to the turnpike along the levees, and we have achieved that. That goal has been achieved. So, as additional nature ecotourism develops, they'll be able to drop people off at the north end, kind of like kayaking down the river, tubing down the river. You drop them off at the north end, they hike or horseback, and they end up down at the turnpike. There have been challenges because a lot of times recreational interests, not quite often, but at times do conflict with other project objectives. I think we've been very successful at finding compromises for those, recognizing that once again flood control is the primary focus of this project, but recreation is also very important.